Welcome everyone to the sixth and final webinar in our series on the proposed new rulemaking that the Department of Labor has issued in the last couple of weeks. I want to welcome everyone here for this webinar that's going to focus on the impact of the new rules on the apprenticeship system, looking at the role of the Office of Apprenticeship and the state apprenticeship offices, how arrangements have changed or would change under the proposed rules. We will be walking through a slide deck. Because our numbers are a little smaller today, I'm just going to encourage folks to sort of jump in and feel free to ask a question or make a comment. And I'm also going to be asking some questions as we go, just to try and provoke a little bit of conversation. To get us started, I'm just going to share a screen here, so give me a second on that. Excellent. I'm hoping that screen is, can I get a thumbs up from somebody that the screen is actually working? I actually lost my.
Yep, you're
Yep,
good.
good. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Since we're a small group, I'm going to sort of waive some of the mute and raise hands. Just jump in if you would, please. That would be great. And then I did want to just make sure everyone was aware of some of the resources that we've got available here. So first off, let me just say, sorry, I just lost my chat. There we go. Sorry. What is going on with Zoom today? I think it's upgraded. It's always a dangerous thing. So we'll be sharing in the chat some of the backgrounds on joining Apprenticeships for America. Of course, we welcome you to do so. We really want to be a voice of apprenticeship, the apprenticeship field, both in advocacy as well as in growing the practice of apprenticeship more broadly in the United States. So there's an opportunity for you all to join Apprenticeships for America. It's free. And then I also just want to give you a little bit of a word on our conference that's coming up here, and an opportunity for you to sign up for that conference. If you're a member, there's a discounted rate, and that will be taking place on March 12th and 13th in Washington, D.C., and we'd love to have you there. Let me also just say that I'm going to skip this. We've also been doing quite a bit of work on sort of analyzing the rules and where we are with them. I want to draw your attention, if you haven't seen it already, to the summary that we put together right after the rules came out in December. We've also since done a side-by-side review of the rules as they relate to the sort of operation of apprenticeship. We just released and will be promoting in the next day or so a final version of what we're calling our burden analysis, which is looking at the impact of individual rules on particular stakeholders. And then finally, along with the burden analysis, we're also going to be issuing a side-by-side review of system-related rules that we put together actually to help us prep for this webinar. And just to give you a sense of sort of what that looks like, here's what our side-by-side looks like. We just tried to look at the current rule as it relates to a particular aspect of the apprenticeship system, and then what the proposed rule looks like. So we're not commenting, just sort of trying to put them side by side so you can look at them. And it's a good quick way to sort of get a sense of sort of what's changed or what's new in the rules. For today, as I said, we'll do this in a little bit more of a discussion format because we have a smaller group. I thought I would just start with an overview of the discussion of the Office of Apprenticeship in the new rules and its roles and responsibilities. Then we'll flip to the states, talk about their roles and responsibilities, the state apprenticeship councils, new rules on reciprocity, and then some new elaborations of apprenticeship rules around the enabling laws in states, state apprenticeship plans, and state reporting. So we'll do all that and just kind of work our way through. Let me just start with the role of the Office of Apprenticeship. In the current rules, there's actually very little that speaks to the role of the Office of Apprenticeship. And I think in these rules, the authors, really sought to sort of create some clarity around what the Office of Apprenticeship is supposed to be doing. So, as you can imagine, of course, registering and providing oversight to apprenticeship programs is first on their list. But they also have the responsibility for looking at these sort of industry validated standards that have been developed into the rules, including the National Occupation Standards and the industry skills frameworks that would be used for the CTE apprenticeships. They recognize and oversee states that opt for the SAA designation. They keep the National Apprenticeship System data and what we know as RAPIDS. They have called out their role in promoting diversity, equity, inclusion in apprenticeship, providing technical assistance and engaging in discussion with stakeholders in the system. So these are now articulated aspects of the role of the Office of Apprenticeship in the rules. And as I say, kind of a new section. There really wasn't a section that related to this particular topic or that relates to this particular topic in the current rules. Let me just ask if there's any questions, feedback, or reactions to this statement here, or this bit of work here. All right. So let's move on to the states, where I think there's a little bit more in the way of change in what the rules mean for state apprenticeship offices. And the first, and not to get too into a sort of Talmudic reading of the rules, but the current rules speak to what states must do if they're going to be SAA states. The proposed rules uses the word authorized. And I thought that was sort of interesting because to me, must implies, well, you must do this and you could do other things. Authorized seems to put a boundary around what states are supposed to be able to do under the National Apprenticeship System. I might be reading more into that than the department intends, but that seems to be a differentiating element between the current rules and the proposed rules. And I think one of the things that falls out from that is that the occupational suitability, what we call under the current rules apprenticeability, is now reserved for the Office of Apprenticeship. States do not have this within their roles of responsibilities or within their authorization under the current rules. So that would be, for some states, a pretty significant change. In the registration area, there is the addition now that completed registration applications are to be acted on within 90 days. And then there are some newly enumerated responsibilities. I'm not sure I would call them new responsibilities because states have largely been doing this work as we go, but now they're enumerated in the rules. So in particular, providing technical assistance, collecting data and reporting that to the Office of Apprenticeship, conducting program reviews, which now gets sort of enhanced attention in the proposed rules, and then fielding complaints. And if you've been part of these webinars, there's quite a bit more attention in the rules on a complaints management process or complaints filing process. And for SAA states, that now becomes an important responsibility of the SAA offices. Any questions about this sort of high-level discussion of roles and responsibilities of the state apprenticeship agencies?
John, is there any mention about the frequency of SAC meeting requirements?
So we're going to get to that in a second, but I don't think there is anything on that. So we'll come to SACs, and in fact, that may be next. Yeah, it is.
Just with the
Steve,
90-day window. Yeah.
We'll get to it in just a second. Any
Okay.
other comments on this slide on the roles and responsibilities of the SAA? I'm going to move us along then. So, Steve, thank you for introducing the state apprenticeship councils. There are a couple of key new elements to the proposed rules. The first is that there is additional verbiage on, I'm sorry, there is new verbiage on the delegation of authority, which is to say that SAA offices may not delegate approval decision-making for registration proposals to the state apprenticeship councils. And I know that will be a change for many states. So you can see all the different things that it may not be delegated down. The narrative that the department had put together on this seemed to be that they saw some problems with state apprenticeship councils in the approval process, and they want to be clear that it's the SAA that makes apprenticeship decisions. That's not to say you couldn't consult with the state apprenticeship councils, but you can't hold a decision to the state apprenticeship council. In the area of composition, there are a couple of changes here. In particular, and they're in the sort of pink font here, pink lettering. That as before, there's a requirement that there are employer representatives, but a call out that there should be a representation from industries and occupations that are not currently widespread in apprenticeship. And same thing for representatives of labor organizations. So of course, that parallels current rules that there should be labor representation on the state apprenticeship councils, but now a call for that to include representatives of labor in non-traditional apprenticeship industries and occupations. And then there is a third group that's now added to the State Apprenticeship Council, which is sort of, you can see here, other members of the general public, and in particular, a desire to see connection between the State Apprenticeship Council and the state's public workforce development system and the state's secondary or post-secondary education systems. And the language on the rules suggests there should be sort of equal weights between these three groups. So if you thought there were, 4 employers, 4 labor representatives, and then 4 of this general public, including representatives of these other state systems. As you can see, Steve, I didn't see anything on the requirement for the number of state apprenticeship council meetings or any. I think that's really left up to the states. Any questions about?
The only reason I bring that up, John, is because of the 90-day window that was mentioned on the previous slide. In order to get programs approved on a 90-day cycle, the frequency of those. Yeah,
that's excellent. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought that through. That's good. But of course, just to be clear, the State Apprenticeship Council is not making decisions on apprenticeship registrations. It can offer feedback, guidance, suggestions, but can't make decisions. Any other questions or comments on the State Apprenticeship Council provisions? So I'm going to move us on to this issue of reciprocity. And I thought it would be helpful just to show the current rule and then the proposed rules. So the current rule actually, calls out that there should be reciprocities between apprenticeship programs that are registered federally or in other states and a particular state. And it does, suggest that there may be some tweaking or review of particular aspects, in particular, the ratio of mentors, journey workers to apprentices, and wage and hour provisions that may need to be updated for a particular state. But it's there, right? And I think many of us have an experience where it may be in the rules, but it's not being abided by. So I think in the spirit of we really mean it this time, they've added some new language around reciprocity between among the states and between the federal and state level registration processes. So you can see here that there's an expectation that a previously registered apprenticeship program should be able to have their reciprocal program acknowledged reciprocity acknowledged within 45 days. So that's a new provision. And there is a little bit of a build out of sort of what are the elements that might be reviewed by a particular SAA state as they're looking at a program that's been registered elsewhere. And you can see some parallel in terms of wage and hour, and the ratio of the ratios. But in addition, to make sure that in fact you have a program that's properly operating or is prepared to properly operate within the state, and then if there are particular licensing or other requirements that are unique to a particular state, that would be another place to sort of assess the reciprocal approval of a particular program. But I think the idea here, at least I take the idea here, is a desire to be firmer about the requirements for reciprocity from among the states and between federal and state registration. Any questions, feedback, or reactions to this?
I have a question about the wage part of this, because, and again, I'm focused on youth apprenticeship. So these are 16 and 17-year-olds. And that wage issue has come up here in California. But I was just wondering if there's any discussion of that here.
In the apprenticeability or the suitability conversation around apprenticeship, there is now a new requirement that the rules state that occupations should be paying a sustainable wage. Now, they say occupations, not necessarily that the apprentice is immediately getting a sustainable wage. And the sustainable wage is a little bit, it's left a little bit open, although there are some definitions around it. So I think you'll want to look at the suitability area of the rules to sort of see, how your program might fit within some of that. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Any other comments on the reciprocity question?
Don, I have two. One related to what Deborah brought up on the wages. I'm having the issue where the wages that we registered in our standards 3 years ago are below the minimum wage.
Yeah.
The states now. And so
yeah,
trying to figure out, we did 3 wage schedules, so I can like eliminate the ones that are below minimum wage. But is there anything in there around that and meeting the minimum wage of their, of each state?
It's a really good question, and those wages have come up fast in a couple of states. So yeah, I can see how we would end up with that. I think the notion here is that, just as you said, you would have to drop the lowest tier or bring the lowest tier up to at least the minimum wage in order to be compliant under the new rules.
I was going to throw in there for Asha's first question that I've seen some of the standards written where the minimum, instead of specifying an amount, like in California, $16, for example, or whatever it is in your city or county, just saying the word minimum wage plus 50 cents per hour, minimum
Great way
wage
to go.
plus $1, that kind of thing. That
Yeah,
way it
and
doesn't become outdated.
Then you're adjusting as you go. That's great.
I like that. That's really helpful. Thank you, Deborah. The second
Great
question
suggestion.
I had related to reciprocity was, did it address anything about the OA states and the reciprocity they should have? Because I'm going through registration with OA states right now where they're creating their own paperwork, and I'm like, this defeats the purpose of reciprocity.
I agree with that, and I think the thrust of this rule would be that you should be able to recycle your old paperwork, and subject to these 3 tests, that should be approved within 45 days. That would be my read of this.
Okay.
Yeah, for OA, for any state. I mean, I'm a little confused why there should need to be a re-registration of any OA. That's a federal,
Agreed.
right? But individual staff. I'll just note on the issue of registration, if I can give a little bit of an advertisement. So on Monday, Apprenticeships for America is releasing a new report which is the result of some interviews with people in the field around apprenticeship registration and some of the issues that we're seeing there. One of the issues that comes up over and over again is how idiosyncratic the process can be, just depending on the person you're working with. They have their own processes and systems, and so it sounds like, Asha, you've been in the middle of that.
I'm dealing with someone who was in an SA state, now in an OA state, so they're making up their own rules.
Definitely, and we have some stories exactly like that, or a position turns over in a state and suddenly the registration process is completely different. So yeah.
Thank you.
Oh. All right, I'm going to move us on. So this is a newly specified section in the rules. Not to say that there weren't expectations before, or that the Office of Apprenticeship wasn't exerting some what they would call sub-regulatory guidance with states. But there is now a section in the rules, or would be a section in the rules, that outlines what enabling legislation in the states must look like for as part of an SAA application for recognition. And you can see the various things here. They really track the regulations for apprenticeship generally, that the legislation should speak to the standards of apprenticeship, the need for apprenticeship agreements, that there would be requirements for program registration, and you can sort of work your way through that list. And I thought if I could take advantage of this group for a sort of quick feedback test here. I'm just wondering how many states, if people are working in a state, an SAA state that has enabling legislation, to what degree does that legislation sort of look like this checklist of items that's here? Is this pretty close to what most states are already doing, or is this going to be some wholly new requirement for legislative action at the state level? Any feedback on that?
I think it looks like we're probably doing all of those things. Maybe not called that.
Okay.
Maybe not this endpoint assessment.
That would be new for almost everybody, but yeah. Okay.
But other than that, it does look like kind of what we do.
Excellent. So, I mean, I would love to be able to say this is a nothing burger. There's no issues here. It's just kind of, except for, maybe this new thing around the endpoint assessment, which is new for everyone. But I did want to just check and see if this is going to create major legislative work and requirements. Asha, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think the specific line, the qualifications of apprentice trainers and providers of related instruction, I believe it's New York and Connecticut require their Department of Ed to provide that review. And that review is completed before the Department of Labor will sign the paperwork. So now if every state is going to do this, how much is that going to be done within the 45 days? Or is that
or does the clock start after you've gotten the approval? Almost certainly, right? So one more hurdle. That's excellent feedback. Something for us to keep in mind as we're working up comments.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other thoughts or reactions to this?
I just wanted to add something about the clock, the 90-day thing. So right now we have 2 youth apprenticeships with our state. They already have the documents. We've already gotten their feedback. We've gone back and forth, but they still haven't started the clock, so to speak.
Because they're not a completed application. Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't the clock start from when you submit it and you've gotten feedback and you've incorporated that feedback? Wouldn't the clock start then?
The language says that it's on receipt of a completed application. And I guess it's up to the SAA to decide what completed means. Yeah,
but application, like we completed the application the first time because it had everything. And then we got feedback on that application.
I have no doubt there will be game playing around this.
So I'm just saying that, that's what I'm thinking. And I think it would be better. No, I think it needs to be operationalized as to when does the clock start. That would be my feedback.
Yeah. Okay, great. Great. I appreciate that. Thanks for that. Any other reactions or thoughts to the enabling law language that's in the proposed rules? All right, I'll move us along to our next topic. And again, this is a newly expanded area. The current rules do actually reference a state plan around apprenticeship, but the only thing that that state plan is intended to address is how the state will abide by and advance the EEO objectives under the current rules. Now, the state plans around apprenticeship have a much more robust set of requirements. You know, that they would include, what's the current state of legislation for the state. But then you can see goals for expansion, how you're going to be serving underserved communities, the whole alignment question between different departments, EEO of course, and then operating plans. Just what does it look like for the SAA to actually execute on its responsibilities, and then a whole nother set of responsibilities, or whole nother set of plan elements that would be required for a state that's going to use the CTE apprenticeship model. And then I'll just say, and in the current rules, that state plan is to be reviewed every 5 years. That's been bumped up to 4 years, and I believe the rationale for that was to sync up the apprenticeship plan with the WIOA plan. And although it's not in the rules, it does feel to me like that could be an element of a combined plan with the WIOA. As some of you know, there's a WIOA combined plan that allows states to sort of bring together a bunch of different plans into one document. We might actually ask for that as part of the rulemaking. Any feedback on this? Let me just ask, for folks who are in SAA states, what kind of visibility does the state's apprenticeship plan have? Is that something that people know about and participate in the planning process, and or is this really just an office exercise for those states? Any feedback on that?
I'd say the State Workforce Board is highly engaged in it, but beyond that, the public, I would say probably not.
Not so much. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Any other feedback on the?
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
We just did a state plan. But I mean, it was sort of handled up at the top level. It wasn't really,
Right.
Didn't really involve I'm a consultant, or ATR, whatever you want to say. And I don't know that it covers all of this.
Yeah. I have a feeling some of these elements will be brand new to states as they're going forward with their plans.
And the question that just popped up in the chat about states particular political, where's the chat? I've lost the chat. But it just popped up.
I see it. Yes. And do you want to jump in on that? This is Ann's comment you're talking to. Ann, do you want to jump in?
Yes, sure. Yeah. I work for an intermediary right now, and I have for about 8 years with HCAP. And well, just to go ahead and say, I work a lot in Florida, and I really enjoy working with that state, and I've been helping them with some things. But I know that some, the universities and colleges, there's a lot of, and I also, I don't know the details, so I'm not trying to say like I know exactly what Florida is doing. Please, I need to say that. But I know they've said, okay, we're not going to do affirmative action. We're not going to, that type of thing for the colleges. Well, in the Department of Education in Florida, that's where the apprenticeship lies. And anyway, and so I'm still helping them with some of the technical development of apprenticeship programs in healthcare. And so far, they still have a page for affirmative action, and I haven't seen any changes, and I haven't asked anyone because I really don't want to get in the middle of it.
Right.
If someone asks me, I'll tell them my opinion, but I really, that's not what I'm paid to do. But I'm concerned about what is going to happen, and I don't see that necessarily happening in a lot of states. I don't know what's happening in other states, if that could be, but still, well, personally, I feel like we have a ways to go on affirmative action and bringing in
Right.
and reaching out to different communities that still have not been reached out to, that could be great apprentices. And so I would hate for any of that to go away. Anyway, I'm just
Yep.
kind of rambling here about it.
No, Ann, so first off, thank you
it's a
for
big deal,
raising it. And I think the worry many of us have as we're going through these regulations, however well-intentioned, I'm sure very well-intentioned, the objectives are around diversity, equity, and inclusion in apprenticeship. I think everyone on this call would say that's a good goal. It also becomes a little bit of a lightning rod in the culture wars. And then does this then become, something that's seized upon, and perhaps the object of lawsuits or other things that would sort of slow down or make challenging the operation of apprenticeship in the states. So I think your comments are well taken. I appreciate it. Other thoughts, or and it could be argued we should just have those fights. Let's have those fights. It's good. That's how societies advance, as we go back and forth and we sort of figure out where we land as a society. But the short-term operational implications may be challenging for folks operating in some states. Very good point. Other comments or reactions to the state apprenticeship plan requirements under the new rules? We're just about through, and then we'll open this up for a broader conversation. Also in the rules, this is I think more in the vein of now being specified as opposed to I'm not sure there's a lot new here, but there is a new language that relates to the role of the SAA in collecting and then reporting information and maintaining an information system to be able to do all that, either by adopting Rapids or by creating your own state system. I did just want to remind that there's now an advancement of many data points that are being collected both at the apprentice level and then at the program level. So the states would be responsible in order to have a national system and comparability of data across the states, and we would need to have states aligned on these data elements. So let me just go back to this. My own inclination is that what we heard from our webinar that was devoted to data and reporting is that many of the aspects that are now specified in the rules, many of the data elements that are specified in the proposed rules, are data elements that people are reporting already, that there isn't significant burden added there, with the important caveat that to the extent there were data elements that were coming from employers and that were being heavily managed, that both creates a burden to the employer and potentially a detriment to getting employer participation in apprenticeships. And then one of our participants actually pointed out, if you get too far down that road, you start to look like a co-employer, and that would certainly create many challenges for sponsored apprenticeship, group-sponsored apprenticeship programs. So again, I would love to be able to get feedback from this group if there's any thoughts or reactions to this data. And Asha, thank you for jumping in already onto the chat. I think the question of post-exit, this is exiters, right? So there is actually a definition of what an exiter looks like, and I don't have that right in front of me, so sorry, Asha. But it is in the rules, and there is actually a little bit of a conversation around how this is to be calculated and what it's to look like. I do think that the post exit monitoring is going to be an area for some conversation as we provide feedback on the rules. Any other reactions or thoughts to the reporting? So I'd like to just open it up for any general comments, questions, or reactions. And bear in mind that part of the purpose of these webinars is not only for us to share our own analysis of the rules, but also to gain your perspectives as we think about trying to compile those into a document that we can use for a comment for comments from the field. So any reactions, feedback, thoughts, questions is germane at this time, and I'm going to stop sharing the slides.
John, do you think more states will be encouraged to switch from OA to SAA, given what's proposed here and how clear it is?
So I actually don't know, except that the trend has been, slowly but surely the SAA numbers are kind of creeping up, right? That's at least what I'm seeing. And so I could see more state. I don't see, there's not incentives necessarily around it. It sort of feels a little bit, but if you just follow the current trends, it does feel like I would expect to see more SAA states as we go, as the years go by. That would be my take, but that's a crystal ball. So I wouldn't take it to the bank.
John, I want to ask just a question about your interpretation of monitoring the and the program outcomes. So someone who cancels, are you also looking to see if, where that person went and tracking whether they entered post-secondary, or is this just completers? Do you think they're looking for just completers to have this outcome data, or also cancels?
So I think they are just looking for completers. And I think, it does feel like there's an option. There should be an option for folks to report other kinds of outcomes. But I think for the purposes of a national data set, they are really focused on exiters for the purposes of tracking as we go.
So they're determining that word exit to mean completer.
Yeah, and actually, since it's now come up a couple of times, I actually do have this.
Because I'm not sure, and that exit would be the same. That it would be the same in the public workforce system. I think it is, but for really long apprenticeship programs, I don't know. So it is just a question. Are they? Do they? Yeah.
It does
I
seem
a big difference in your
Exeter
tracking.
is a term from my WIOA days,
right?
And are they counting cancellations as exiters also? Yes.
So I actually I have it in front of me. So I'm glad you asked, because now I can be slightly intelligent. So the exeter that they are referring to is anyone who leaves after the probationary period.
I thought so. That's a huge difference, right? That is someone can go way through, halfway through the program, not complete, and you're still tracking outcomes for that. That's what I thought that was. I was kind of hoping it wasn't, but that's what I thought it might be. So I'm glad you checked that.
Yeah, thank you for pushing me to do that. And let me just not include exiters during the probationary period. So it's everyone. I guess the good news here is you might be able to tell some stories about what those exiters are up to. And there, as we all know, there can be very successful outcomes for people who do not complete programs. And so we should be tracking that. But it also means we have to track that.
Yes. And it was incredible when I worked in the workforce system. It is incredibly hard to find people, and some of these, there's nothing less than a year, right? So it is very hard to find people. So, to what degree of searching do you have to do?
Yep. Excellent.
One thing I worked with pre-apprenticeship quite a few years ago, and I was able to get our funders to count. We were trying to get people, women into apprenticeship programs, but I also, in working with them and my own experiences, I found that some women would like to go into apprenticeship, but they were too afraid because they were getting off of welfare, but they're afraid they'll get laid off and then not have health care through the kids and also not have money. So like for myself, who went through pre-apprenticeship as a single mom, I ended up taking a job as a Teamster truck driver for $17 an hour back in the 80s, a long time ago. But that way I had a steady job and
Yes.
insurance and everything for myself and my daughter. But I did not go into apprenticeship when I completed the pre-apprenticeship
The
program.
pre-apprenticeship program.
But then
Yeah,
when I
yeah,
went back to about like 7 or 8 years after working out in non-traditional work, I understood that with the women I was working with. So I was able to get it to be that apprenticeship was a positive outcome. That was the main one, but also a
There are
good
other positive outcomes. Excellent.
living wage job and
Yeah.
and non-traditional. And so there are different things, but then that does take up time. And then, it is hard to go and find
Yep.
people. So,
I love the idea though of and maybe optionally giving programs the opportunity to track other kinds of positive outcomes for exiters, and to be able to at least put an asterisk next to that completion rate number, so that I think there will always be a completion rate, which is really, numerator and denominator, and there you go. But if there's some way of being able to contextualize that with some of these other outcomes, that's great.
Yeah, because I was a positive outcome,
Right.
went ahead and doing the $17 an hour with the Seattle Times as a truck driver.
Excellent.
Teamster job. It was a great job. But anyway, sorry,
No, great, Ann. Thank you
going
for
on
the
too much,
comment.
but yeah, that's
Other reactions, thoughts, or comments on the system rules as we've presented them? Let me just say, I'll be hanging out for a little bit, and the pro tip is the after party is sometimes where the juiciest stuff comes out in these webinars. So do feel free to stay on. We can have a chat afterwards. Let me just give a quick coming attractions. So we're going to go a little bit quiet for the next 10 days or so here. What you will receive as a follow-up to all of these webinars is we now have all the recordings. They're up on YouTube, so we'll be sending you a link to those. We've got all of the slides that'll be ready for download, and of course all of our reports. Those will all be available. We were hoping today, but it'll probably be tomorrow. And we'll have an email going out to anyone who participated in these webinars, so you can access those resources. And then in about 10 days or so, 10 days to 2 weeks, we're going to be going out with a report that speaks to some of our recommendations for comments on the rules, and it may come out in a couple of pieces because we actually want to keep to the timeline, but also it's a lot of work, and so we're looking for feedback on those reports, and then we're going to be running what we're calling a comments campaign, which will really be about engaging you in the field in a process to make sure the Department of Labor hears from us around concerns and issues. Of course, we will have some suggestions on things you can say, but you can say whatever you want in that comment period. I will tell you, I looked on the comments website this morning. There are exactly 8 comments. 3 of them have to do with asking for more time to make comments. We have a long ways to go to really get our numbers up, so that the department has a full sense of sort of how the field is looking at some of the recommendations that are in these proposed rules. So more to come on that. Stay tuned. We'll probably have a webinar that's just devoted to our comments and to the comments process. As I say, probably in about 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. Right now, the deadline, unless these requests for an extension of the comment period are entertained, right now the comment period expires in like the second week in March. So we're working our way through this period, and we want to be sure we have all the comments in to guide the department's decision making on final rules. Thank you everyone for participating. As I say, I'll be hanging around for the after party if anyone has questions or just wants to talk informally. Thank you.